So the next macro variable that I want to talk to you about is light exposure. But before I'm starting to talk about light exposure, you need to understand what melatonin is. Because melatonin is the sleep hormone we produce as the sun goes down that is responsible for making us feel tired and ready for bed. And underneath you can see the chemical composition of melatonin. It's maybe something you are already aware of because sometimes you can buy these pills that claim to give you artificial melatonin, but it's actually our own body that is already producing it based upon the light exposure that we get. So this graph has a very good overview of what happens in the body. As you can see, during the day when there is light, melatonin levels are very low, right? So this is what makes you feel energetic and feel awake. And as you can also see, the body temperature is quite high, right? In the previous lecture, we talked about the oscillation of the body temperature. And as you can see, in the night time, the melatonin levels rise drastically and also your body temperature drops. The black line that you can see is, by the way, cortisol, right? Which is high during the day because cortisol is like a stress hormone, which makes you feel awake. So you want to have high levels of cortisol, but they are very low the moment you fall asleep. So the moment your body temperature goes down, your melatonin levels rise up and the cortisol goes down, which makes you feel sleepy. And this is a natural chemical process your body helps you with. And it is very much dependent upon light exposure. So you can basically influence your melatonin production through light exposure itself. And some people think, okay, but light exposure, should I think about the lamp in my office or the screens that I'm looking at? Well, it's very important that you need sunlight. And if you look at this graph that was taken from Wikipedia, you can see that the illuminance rate, which is measured in lux and is basically the rate on how to say how bright a light is, you can see that full daylight is in between 10,000 and 25,000 lux. Whereas if you look at the office building lighting, it's only 80 lux, right? So the impact of sunlight is not comparable with the impact of the artificial lights that we have in our home. And a fun fact that the melatonin production changes over time, as you can see here. For example, younger people will have higher melatonin production. And it's really natural and normal that older people have less melatonin production and therefore have more trouble with falling asleep because that whole rhythm that I just showed you here is less likely to happen. So something needs to be done in order to get this natural sense of sleepiness which you used to have as a child. So just to summarize, a lack of sunlight results in melatonin production, but higher levels of melatonin make us tired because they lower our body temperature. So ideally, the exposure to plenty of light throughout the day, and we limit our exposure to light when we prepare for bed and during the sleeping hours. Right? This is very important. So make sure that once you are going to bed or 2 hours prior to bed, that there is no artificial bright lights shining upon you. Because if you do so, you decrease the production of melatonin, which is that natural hormone that makes you feel sleepy. And if you are awake, you should get plenty of light exposure to lower your melatonin production and again get that oscillation going to make sure that this natural energetic moments exist when you wake up, because the cortisol rises naturally, your melatonin lowers naturally, and in the evening when there's less light exposure and it gets dark, that's when you get asleep naturally. So this is a very powerful variable that we are in control of to make sure that you control the quality and quantity of your deep sleep.